So as Jennifer said, my name's Ellie Harrison. I've been living in Glasgow since 2008. And actually when I first moved here, I was immediately shocked by how expensive and poorly coordinated the public transport was as a result of deregulation and privatisation of our buses and trains in the 80s and the 90s, which Jackson has highlighted. But why were we putting up with this abysmal service, especially in a city with one of the lowest levels of car ownership in Britain, with so many big out-of-town housing estates, which means that we have so many people who are living beyond walking and cycling distance from the city centre, who are completely dependent on the bus. The dire state of our public transport is exacerbating inequalities. It is pushing more people into poverty. If they can't afford the fares, or if they're forced to buy a car for want of better options, or simply if they don't have the bus routes necessary to reach jobs and opportunities. Something had to be done. So in 2016, I was involved in the group of local people who set up the Get Glasgow Moving campaign. And our aim was to demand that our politicians deliver a fully integrated and affordable public transport network for us all. That means our buses, trains and subway being planned and coordinated to work together in harmony to serve all corners of the region. That is how public transport is meant to work. But it can only be achieved with proper governance and regulation of the transport network as a whole. But with Free Our City, with the new campaign we're launching today, we are going one step further, and we're demanding a world-class, fully integrated and accessible public transport that is free at the point of use, and now is the perfect time to begin to deliver it. The Free Our City Coalition, which includes Get Glasgow Moving, the Glasgow Trades Council, and all the groups that Jennifer mentioned at the start, we've been meeting regularly to develop the campaign during the coronavirus lockdown. So it's been a time when public transport has been proven to be that essential public service that we always knew it was to get our key workers to their jobs. It's been a time in which we have seen quite starkly the absurdities of having a privatised system, with the Scottish Government promising bailouts of £260 million to the private bus companies on the 25th of March. But it's also been a time where public transport's been singled out as something that we should try to avoid. So our public transport was already long overdue a massive overhaul to deliver the comprehensive and reliable service essential for any city in the 21st century. But as we emerge from the pandemic, which we hope we will next year, this will become ever more important to get people back using the bus. We cannot afford to let bus patronage decline any more than it already has since deregulation. Last year, Glasgow City Council declared a climate emergency and agreed the ambitious target of reaching net zero carbon emissions by 2030. That means a radical transformation of the way we move around the city in just 10 years. We need to dramatically reduce car use and shift all of our journeys onto walking, cycling or public transport instead. And as places like Tallinn and Dunkirk and the hundreds of other towns and cities across the world have shown, free public transport is the only way to achieve a transformation on that scale. Free public transport benefits everyone. It will boost our economy, it will lift people out of poverty, and it will cut congestion, carbon emissions and air pollution. But as Xavier also highlighted, free public transport will create a more equal and better integrated society where using the bus is no longer seen as something that you're forced to do for lack of other options, but something that is just the norm for people from all walks of life. It's time for us to create a new public service for our city, which we can all take pride in again, and which can provide the many new green jobs which we urgently will need as the massive recession we're entering kicks in. So how do we make this happen? Well, we must work together to mount a huge amount of pressure on our political leaders to deliver this goal. Last September, Glasgow City Council approved a recommendation from their Climate Emergency Working Group to undertake a formal assessment of the potential for making the transition to a public transport system that is free to use. We have got to hold them to that. But in response to our Free Our City campaign launch, they've since said in the newspaper that a free public transport area would, at the very least, require public ownership. And this is a quote: "The alternative being taxpayers write a blank cheque to the private operators with little say over the service." And we agree with this, Glasgow City Council. As Dunkirk and Tallinn, who we'll hear from later, have shown, the only affordable way to deliver this is through full public ownership and control of the whole network. And fortunately, as Jackson has mentioned, we have the powers to do just that in the Transport Act 2019 for re-regulation and for public ownership. So this is what we need to push for. So we have a little route map to free public transport over the next few years. Step one is to re-regulate all the buses using the franchising powers in the Transport Act, so that we can plan the network properly to reach isolated communities and to integrate seamlessly with other transport modes, so our train and our subway. And at that point, we can impose an immediate cap on the extortionate fares that companies like First are charging. Then we can set up a publicly owned bus company for Greater Glasgow and start taking over the routes one by one. Or, as Jackson mentioned, we could buy out First Glasgow. And then once we've done those first two things, we will have brought the costs under control. We currently give more than £300 million in public subsidies to private bus companies every year in Scotland. Once those costs have been brought under control, we can roll out free fares for all.